Hello, everybody, and welcome to Starts at 60's Boomer Insights session. My name's Rebecca Wilson, and we have Bernard Salt here with us today. Thank you for joining us, Bernard. Today, we're going to bring you a powerful set of demographic insights into the baby boomer from Australia's most revered demographic commentator. I think that's what they call you most commonly, isn't it, Bernard?
Well, it depends. Millennials call me something else regarding smashed avocado, I think. But yes, you may call me whatever you wish. So,
then I'm going to present to you the insights from the Starts at 60 Boomer Guide in detail, pointing out opportunities for businesses addressing this demographic all the way through, because I think there's so many things we get to see from our chair at Starts at 60, and probably so many you get to see from the data, Bernard, that I'm excited about what we can share and what we can all learn as we head towards a post-COVID environment.
Well, yes. In fact, this is in fact one of the most important times, I think, in recent Australian history. I think we're at an inflection point. I think that the world beyond COVID is a different world to the world that we have left behind. Hopefully, it'll be a better world, and certainly a very different world for the baby boomers. I think they will formalise them moving out of the workforce and into what they are going to call the lifestyle stage of the life cycle. So very exciting from a boomer's point of view, I would have thought.
All right, well, let me get through the setup, and then we're gonna sit and look forward to everything you're going to teach us today. We're going to provide you hopefully a whole lot of insights you might not get in your day-to-day business dealings, because I know not a lot of people talk about the over 60s in their day-to-day marketing. So many of you have worked with Starts at 60 over the years. You may not realize just how far we've come from our beginning as a media company. Starts at 60 is now Australia's largest and most engaged digital platform dedicated to the digital savvy over 60s. We're the #1 media brand, and I'll pop a little slide up for you so that you can see where we've got to these days. We're the #1 website for over 60s in Australia, serving more than 1 million readers with highly engaged news and expert-sourced media related to retirement every month. We're also a growing travel marketplace and full-service travel operation, Travel at 60. And last year, we launched a rapidly growing e-commerce marketplace, the Starts at 60 marketplace, an online shopping platform where vendors with products suited to over 60s can list and sell them with our team and audience in the driving seat. So if you haven't already checked out our website, there's a little picture for you, and please do at startsat60.com. Now, before I let Bernard take the mic, I'm going to turn off the beautiful slides and make sure that we introduce him properly, because he is somebody that we are all very excited to have here today. Bernard Salt is widely regarded as Australia's leading social and demographic commentator. He writes and he speaks, and his views on social, demographic and cultural change are sought daily by business, government and the media. You'd see him as a columnist in The Australian and many other newspapers, a speaker, a business advisor, a media commentator, and I think you probably do know him for the smashed avocado, but more broadly, he's been known for identifying and tagging new tribes and social behaviours, and that as a marketer, that's what I look up to you for, is the tribal recognition. And he's for a long time helped us at Starts at 60 to make sure we analyse the tribes of the baby boomer generation. So if you have any questions for Bernard today, he's going to take the mic for the first 15 or 20 minutes and lead us through a really nice preamble. But before he starts, hang on, I'm gonna set the scene. Boomers are today's over 60s, right? We're Starts at 60, and the coolest 60-year-olds are the boomers. The last of the boomers turn 60 next year. They're the largest, richest, best educated generation in a lifetime of Australians. They reaped all the benefits of post-war growth, which younger generations complain about: rising property prices, increasing social freedoms, the dot-com boom, the growth of the superannuation honeypot. They live by the mantra, forever young. Right? And frankly, they've made the world a better place since they took over as well, with a lot of freedoms being opened up. They control 50% of the country's wealth, 46% of consumer spending, 61% of over-the-counter health purchasing, 50% of alcohol purchasing, 64% of new car purchases, and 55% of leisure travel spending when we let them out of their houses, right? yet they feel ignored. Now, Bernard, you're part of this generation, right? And that's another reason I love to hear you speak about them, because you speak with a certain level of personal insight as well. And I'm going to hand it over to you to tell us a few things about this generation and have some fun. And I'll get your slides up while you talk.
Well, thanks very much, Beck, and thanks also to Starts at 60 for the invitation to speak. Yes, my special subject apparently is the baby boomer, the species of life form that is now pushing into retirement. Although I don't think that baby boomers really like the word retirement. Never use the R word to a baby boomer. They'll never retire. Retirement's for old people. But they will move into a lifestyle stage of the life cycle, and they will have a bucket list. So it's a more positive view of life's later years than the preceding generation's view of retirement. If we can get the first slide up, I want to show you the way in which Australian society is changing, and particularly our attitudes towards older age. Basically, the baby boomers, there's 25 million people in Australia, there's about 5 million, just under 5 million in the baby boomer set, born 1946 through to 1964. This is the generation that followed on from the Depression and war years. So the number of people in that preceding generation was about 2.5 million. So you've got a doubling in the population from 2.5 million people to 5 million people. And at every stage of the life cycle that the baby boomers have moved through, they've had quite an extraordinary impact. When they went to secondary school in the 1970s, many Australian states had to import American teachers to cope with the bulge. Then they went to university and created the whole university student culture from the 1970s and 80s. Then they became yuppies in the 1980s. And then they had children, of course, and by the 1990s, they were moving into that sea change, tree change stage of the life cycle. If you actually look at this slide that I have up, you can see the way in which life expectancy has changed in Australia over 80 years. In 1941, life expectancy was barely 63 years. You qualified for the age pension at that time at 65, so you dropped dead 2 years before you got the pension back in 1941. There were no teenagers. You were a child for 14 years, then you're an adult, and you're an old person at 51 or 52. This is back in the 1940s and earlier, of course. So that means if you are unhappy in your relationship at the age of 50, you'd think, you know, what's the point? I'm going to be dead in 10 years' time. I might as well just wait this out. So there was no old age. There was no retirement at that time. 40 years later, 1981, life expectancy is now pushed out to, what's that, 74 or so. So you get about 10 years in retirement, and you can start, you know, you have permission to start acting old, sort of mid-60s when you think about that, if you're going to die in your mid-70s. Sorry to be so blunt about this, but that's the way life works. And then if you move to today, you can see that extension of life expectancy. We're now at, 84 years of age on average. So that is 19 years in retirement. You can't be 50 years old and act old, because you've got another 35 years of life or more to live. So we've got to do something with that 50 to 60 to 70, even 75 stage of the life cycle. And that is what has been evolving over the last 10 years or so. If you actually look back through time, you can see the way in which the teenage phase emerged as a transition between childhood and adulthood. Generation Y, the millennials, stretched that teenage years. I think you're now a teenager between the ages of 13 and 29. You sort of postpone commitment. And the adult phase is contracting. And then you have this sort of lifestyle phase between 55 and 65. Now, people can't quite tell whether you're working or you're retired. That's really an invention of the baby boomers. And then you retire properly, maybe, or lifestyle properly between 65 and 75. And then you have permission to be old, late 70s, early 80s. Although I reserve the right to move those boundaries as I move through the life cycle. Baby boomers will never. Yeah, well, no, it's the stage in the life cycle. It's when we determine people are old 80 years ago, you were old at 50, whereas today, I think you have to have at least be in your 80s or so, which means that the boomers in their 60s and 70s don't see themselves as old. And particularly coming out of the pandemic, I think many of them were remaining in the workforce because, they have tertiary education and they're not really bending over welding as their parents did or their father did. So they're not blue collar workers. They are service workers, professional workers working on. Along comes COVID, forces them to rethink where they are in life and to ask this central question: how many good years do you have left? And if I was in the marketing business, that is the unsettling proposition that I would want to leave with baby boomers. You're 62, 63, or whatever you are. How many good years do you have left? And do you really want to spend that time commuting, doing work, dealing with clients, dealing with the office politics or whatever? Or do you want to do what you want to do, what you finally want to do? And so that is where you unleash that spending power that Beck was referring to. That is, it's not just the time in the life cycle, it's also the time post-pandemic and the sheer number of baby boomers that are presenting to this stage in the life cycle. The boomers were hippies, punks, dinks, and yuppies. They change the culture at every stage of the life cycle. They will not age as their parents have aged throughout their 60s and 70s. They'll do it differently. Beck referred to the cool 60s. I'm not sure if anyone else would agree about the cool 60s, but they'll do it with a twist. And they're looking for something a bit left field, something positive, something aspirational, something non-judgmental, something that seen as a reward, just desserts, if you like, for a lifetime effort. They're the sort of messaging, I think, that would certainly connect with that baby boomer generation. So remember, that's 5 million people, or just under, jumping now into the space previously occupied by 2.5 million. And this is the baby boomer tsunami. So that wave has worked its way through the life cycle over the last 60 years, effectively. And now they're moving into retirement. And whereas 80 years ago, that would have meant, they'll be dying off, but that ain't happening. That will not happen until the early 2030s. The 2020s is the baby boomers' golden decade, and particularly after the pandemic, because the pandemic is like a hard edge, like a circuit breaker. Let go of what was before and reinvent and reimagine and be excited by what flows beyond. This is the idea that at different stages in life and in the life cycle, people see triggers, and I've actually seen this through the different decades. If you actually go to the next slide, I want to show you how this works. Say in your 40s, you might be, you have family, so you might be get divorced, for example. Not a pleasant topic to talk about, but women tend to get divorced in their late 30s, men in their early 40s. Kind of happens, 7-8 years after marriage. Teenagers arrive in that stage of the life cycle in your 40s. I'm not sure whether that's connected to the rise of divorce in the 40s. You're struggling to get to the top at work. If you look at the peak CEOs, they're always mid to late 40s or so scrambling to the top. There's work pressures, of course, and work frustrations if you don't make it to the top. It's a very tough decade, I think. Certainly looking back, I think it was certainly a tough decade. Then in the 50s, and of course, baby boomers have been through this. Divorce is still present, kids leave home, and it does shake you up. The kids leave home, all of a sudden they don't need you anymore, and you reassess life, of course. There could be a health scare. A friend of a friend's cousin drops dead from a heart attack. You think, why am I doing this? You reassess life. You might get an inheritance. And in fact, the peak age at which an Australian's parents die is the age of 58. It's actually, you can see it through the census, because the age at which people deliver care to a family member peaks at 58 and then it dies off. And I think that's because at 58, your parents, 30 years old, 88, typically die. So there's an inheritance there as well. Move on to the 60s. So we're now into the baby boomer space at the moment. So the baby boomers have been through all of this and they are navigating retirement or the lifestyle stage of the life cycle. Never use the R word to a baby boomer. Their kids get married, so it can be expensive, of course. You can have the death of a friend or, again, more health issues, the sea change, the tree change, and certainly many people are doing this. They're escaping the city to go to the country. I've actually tagged this group of city escapees. I call them the Vespers, V-E-S-P-A, the virus escapees seeking provincial Australia. And I think that there's a fair shake of baby boomers vespering out of our capital cities, looking for a sea change and tree change at the moment. Then you move on to the 70s, and this would be first wave baby boomers. So they'd be, born in the late 1940s. So they're already into their 70s. They're, focus on grandchildren. What a delightful time in the life cycle that is to be well enough to enjoy your grandchildren. And at that time also, sometimes your kids divorce, so you kind of still a lot of family issues at that time. And then late 70s, sadly, that's when there can be the death of a partner. And this is the point that baby boomers, the midpoint of the baby boomers, is sort of back in the early part of the 60s. They've got about a bit more than 10 years. The 2020, literally the 2020s, should be their golden years. They don't have a mortgage, mostly. They should have reasonably good health. The kids are off their hands, hopefully. They've let go of work. What are they going to do? Sit home and garden? Well, that's the opportunity. You need to seed the idea, the concept that there's a bucket list. There's a whole series of things to do, to achieve, to experience, to cram into these golden years of life. Even golden years, I'm not quite, that's a little old. These concepts need to be colourful years. They need to be made over. We need a makeover. Come in and just rethink the language. And then, of course, in your 80s, this is way off into the future for the baby boomers. Matters like powers of attorney, of course, institutional care often, and spiritual focus. There's a question in the census that asks, what is your religious affiliation? Those most likely to have any sort of religious affiliation are aged over 80. And I think the reason for that is that if you think you're going to bump into God any day, you're more likely to believe. It's a very spiritual time in life, very reflective. People evaluate their lives. And again, that needs to be respected if you're selling product or dealing with that generation. But if you look back, it's the 60s and early 70s that you would have to say are the golden, colourful stage in the life cycle that 5 million baby boomers jumping into the space previously occupied by 2.5 million people are moving into. So that is literally the baby boomer tsunami tipping out of the, spilling out of the workforce into the 2020s. Looking for engagement, looking for product and service experience, something to enhance and to embellish their lifestyle. What can you do to be part of that narrative is the question for anyone relating to the baby boomers or marketing to the baby boomers in this decade. And with that, I'll pass back to Beck.
It's an interesting conversation and one I'm going to keep on talking. Now, before you go anywhere, I think we might have a question for you from one of our attendees in the chat room. And if anybody does have any questions, I have got the live screen in front of me while we have Bernard for a couple more minutes and before I take over and take you into all of the deep insights that we have about the way consumers today are behaving. Now, Bernard, the term downsizing is used a lot at the moment in marketing. Do we know if the term is liked, hated, or not really understood?
Well, I actually do think that the baby boomers like the idea of downsizing, moving from a 4-bedroom rambling house down to something, 2-bedroom. It's the opportunity to, and I've heard this a number of times, to streamline, to cleanse, to get rid of clutter, to actually make sure that you're not burdening to the next generation with stuff, from decades ago, and to actually streamline. I actually wrote a column about this last weekend where I talked about clutter people, I think Australians love going on holidays, to an Airbnb destination somewhere, largely because, you open up cupboards and there's nothing there. You can put all your stuff into a pure white cupboard. It's clean, it smells fresh. Then you go home and you think, oh gosh, we need that sort of spaciousness in our own home. So I actually think that the baby boomers could be enticed into that concept, as it's not just an opportunity to downsize, but to streamline, to cleanse, to declutter, to reimagine, get rid of all your sort of mahogany type furniture, which was really chic in the 1980s, and get a sort of update to a more modern look. This is part of reimagining in a positive way your life and your lifestyle going forward, and downsizing is part of that.
Thank you so much. I've got one more question just popped in. Here's an interesting one. So my business is retail, online sexual wellness. And I feel sometimes that shame is a barrier and acceptance to this topic amongst over 60s. Do you have any feedback on that?
Well, I was very surprised, because was it not the baby boomers who led the sexual revolution in the 1960s? And so I can't imagine that they've got all conservative over the last 30, 40 years or so. But look, generally, I think that generation see themselves as the most progressive generation. There might be some people who have more traditional views, which is fine. But I would have thought that the baby boomers are those that have very different attitudes towards sexuality. I will say that baby boomer, as parents, were quite relaxed about their millennial kids bringing their partners home. That was always a big issue in the baby boomer household back in the 1970s and 1980s. People brought up with the Depression-era traditional values were just, there was certain things that you just could not countenance. Whereas the baby boomers had a much more relaxed attitude towards that. So I would expect that mindset to gather momentum, in fact, over the next decade. Not the sort of question I get often in these sorts of forums, but that's all right.
Oh, well, we work with Susan in the Start the 60 marketplace, and I know we're actually taking out some. She said blushing, Bernard.
That's right.
But look, one last question from us is how do you think COVID has changed this consumer and will change this consumer over the next couple of months as we head towards that immunisation number? What do you think it's going to do?
Well, I think COVID has had an extraordinary impact on Australia and no doubt other countries as well. This is not a short event. This is a 2, if not 2.5 year event. That is critical mass. That is commensurate with the scale of a war in terms of time frame. So you've had this issue festering and fermenting, if you like, for 2.5 years. You don't come out the other side of that unchanged. The sort of things that have changed, I think, that the consumer market is far more digitally adept and looking for authenticity, authentication, they're building trust through apps and so forth. They're more likely to buy online, I think, than ever before. And from the baby boomers' point of view, it's like a break point. You could argue that they should have been retiring 10 years or so ago, and many of them hung around. But this is a break. This is a circuit breaker. Now is the time we must confront the reality that there is only a certain number of good years left, and what are you going to do with them? You're going to waste them? You're going to squander them, or are you going to do something meaningful? And who is going to help me do something meaningful for my family, for my life, my relationship going forward? That's the sort of language I think will connect to the baby boomers in the 2020s, the colourful 2020s. I think we've just coined a new term there, the colourful 2020s. Not quite the roaring 2020s, but the colourful.
Good decade, right? This is, and it's interesting to note there's about 400,000 people arriving in this cohort every year at the moment, and only about 200,000 falling out the other end. So it's a growing wave that's sort of hitting here, and they're all digitally savvy. The ones coming down the other side are not. So it's
well, that's true. I think there is a myth that baby boomers and older people were not really digitally savvy. I don't agree with that at all.
Where I'm going to start today, Bernard.
My generation was the first generation to have fee-free tertiary education, well-educated retirees. First generation of retirees who are educated, opinionated, articulate, and literate, and computer literate as well. So this generation will do things very differently in retirement. So help them reimagine a positive version of life's later years. Just never use the R word when you're speaking to a baby boomer.
Oh, I'm going to have to go and change the name of our retirement guide, Bernard. What am I going to call it?
Lifestyle guide.
Funny, a lifestyle doesn't stir up as much dust in the community.
Well, you need to get out your thesaurus and work out, or log on to your resource.
Think of a sexy name.
I will. Yes, that's right.
It's look, thank you so much. Oh, hang on, there's another thing popped up in the chat room. Don't go yet.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's it. So great, thanks from everybody in the chat room today. I'm going to keep going. We're going to farewell Bernard because he has an important appointment to sneak off to, and I have some really detailed insights that are going to hopefully give you lots of business ideas and opportunities to work on.
Thanks, Bev.
Thank you, Bernard.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
So we're going to take a deeper look at this pretty groovy time of life. Some of you out there will be in your 60s, but most of you are marketing to over 60s. So I'm going to speak through the lens of a marketer. Most of the data we have today comes from the Big Starts at 60 survey we did back in April, and have gathered a lot of data. There's also some secondary data from sources like Nielsen and Roy Morgan, which can hopefully, when brought together, provide you some very useful insights into this consumer. Now, big data sets from Nielsen. 50% of private wealth in Australia is controlled by the over 60s. 46% of Australia's disposable income is in the over 60s hands. 94% of this consumer says they do research online, and we're going to look at the data behind that number. And 78% are comfortable with switching brands actively now. This is something that has been seen to have changed quickly since the silent generation have moved and digital has become their tool. 64% of all new vehicles are bought by 60 pluses. 55% of all leisure travel spending is by over 60s by volume. Obviously, COVID has changed that number and it's pretty unreportable at the moment. 50% of alcohol is purchased by 60 pluses. What, you thought they didn't party anymore? And 94% say they dislike the way brands speak to them in their marketing. So that's an opportunity, and we're just going to keep pointing out the opportunities today. We are here as a gateway or a doorway to the over 60s, and we're very, very collaborative in our approach, hence why we want to share all this data with you so that you can better speak to them, because together we can have enormous success. So let's talk about the mindset of a 60-year-old. Only 64% of the 60-year-olds we surveyed said they were retired, and 16.3% planned to retire in the next year. There's a number at the end of the survey about how COVID has affected them. A large number in the 10% realm have actually delayed retirement. So that wave is larger coming towards retirement at this point as COVID comes to an end. And it's important to note that out of the people who have retired, 59% say they've retired and love it. But there's some other sentiments that you need to understand that may be ways to speak through the fears of this generation, maybe opportunities to help them jump over, because I think planning makes a good retirement. So there is 1.2% that see retirement as something to fear, 8.3% that are waiting in mindful anticipation, can't wait to get there, 9.3% that have retired and wish they hadn't, and 10.9% that are nervous, right? Planning is the key. As Bernard said, don't think that this over 60 isn't digitally savvy. Assume they can use the internet. But bear in mind, we've surveyed a digital cohort of about 1 million over 60s in our community that come in every month on a highly engaged basis. So 66% of our community have been online for 15 plus years. And the younger people in this cohort are similar. 97% have been online for 5 years or more, and they feel very competent there. You can see across the data sets that you know, only 2.5% have been using the internet for less than 5 years here. And they're online as much as young people are, if not more, if you look at the data splits on younger generations. 22% of our audience say they're online more than 26 hours in a week, which is as high as the youth metric goes on the benchmarks from Nielsen and Roy Morgan. 7.5% or 7.1% are spending less than 5 hours online a week. But the averages are coming out there between 15 and 26 hours, which is compelling for how to speak to this generation. And they're catching up with what I'd say common media trends. A few years ago, I think this industry was late, or this demographic was late to Netflix. It was reliant on Foxtel. It was consuming free media still in print. And I think this has shifted fundamentally since our last survey just before COVID began. We can now see 56% of our audience has taken up Netflix, and 28% are left in that Foxtel product there. We've got 23.5% have adopted Spotify for their music, and only 19% have adopted a digital newspaper subscription that is paid. 17% in print, often those are sold as a bundled product. Stan is starting to creep onto their radar at 14%. They're using in smaller amounts varying paid products and services through media. But it's interesting simply to understand how you would reach this consumer through paid media in the next wave. Their free media consumption might surprise you. We're pleased to see ourselves up the top of this as the #1 website they visit regularly. Bureau of Meteorology is the website that follows most behind us, not any other media site or media aggregator. Coming through to the ABC, obviously a trusted news source for this generation, and then news.com and Google News, those free news sources that proliferate through the mobile phones. Apple News is only a small player for this demographic, and then you're in the major mastheads, but only small cross sections of the audience in those places. Now, I love to stop and point out before we move on that this generation changed the world, and they are changing retirement. You don't need to hear that from me though. Let's let the data tell the story. Because a couple of years ago, this consumer wasn't shopping online. They weren't making as many purchases in all the different ways, and they weren't this healthy. So first of all, we want to point out that this consumer wants more from advertisers. And this shows in switching propensity data that we've surveyed them on as well. We know that the consumer at this point of the cycle is interested in advertising that brings them value. And it's something we've been very focused on at Starts at 60. They also like advertising that helps and educates them. And I think that's important to understand, that advertising that does a hard sell doesn't really come up popular on their list. They're looking for better deals, and because they can use the internet, they know how to find them. I think gone is the day where you can expect a baby boomer to be signed up to a contract with your telco, bank, tier 1 service provider and simply not tell them about a better offer that's in the market and expect them not to find it and expect them to stick. 92% say they actively seek out a good deal on products they plan to buy. And I think that the strongly agree was 50% of that mix. 80% of this demographic now say their health is good or better. When I started Starts at 60 nearly 10 years ago, that number was down under 70. And that is simply an enormous change to how people prioritize their health. We only see 30% in the lower bracket here, but they do have ailments, right? And 49% suffer arthritis, which allows us to speak to them about solutions. In every area of their health needs, I think health presents an opportunity to product and service companies that can provide solutions, because a lot of these issues are related to age, and a lot of them affect all of the other things that go on in their life. When I put this in the context of our business, we're constantly on the hunt for businesses that have solutions to these problems, like arthritis and solutions that can help people lose weight. Obviously, issues like high blood pressure affect a large proportion of the population, with 46% there. And joint pain, back pain, and arthritis are often linked together with the weight issues. We see eyesight issues very prevalent in the demographic. 36% say they have chronic eyesight issues, but 86% wear glasses as well, it's worth noting. And hearing is an interesting subject because we've learned over the years that people often have a hearing issue, but it remains unaddressed if they haven't admitted to themselves that they have it. A challenge for hearing companies to get this consumer to acknowledge that problem that might not be positioned in their must-fix bucket at the moment. Many of the other issues, as you come down this graph, are issues that can be serviced by brands and products. And we encourage you to look for ways to solve it with us and reach out to us if you have it. How do brands do this? 86.5% wear prescription glasses to solve that eye problem. 18% wear hearing aids. 11% have a CPAP machine, because we do know that that chronic sleep apnea is a significant issue for the generation. 73% of the generation are actively choosing healthier diets, and brands are speaking to them with solutions for their diet, whole foods, wholesome solutions. 69% are undertaking regular health screenings, and 51% are taking supplements. But look a little deeper, because there's so much more tied up in this. You can't travel if when you get on the cruise ship, you can't step over the lip of the bath. You can't understand the solution that you're going to take if you have inconvenient health issues, and brands don't speak to you through them with respect and consideration. The more prepared, this generation is more prepared to switch than ever before. I think when I started Starts at 60, somebody said to me, oh, they're bolted on, they're never going to change telco, they're never going to change bank. Well, we asked them, because I didn't want to be the bearer of that information. It's always better to hear it directly from the community. So, straight from the mouths of the community, 78.9% are prepared to switch a brand if they find a better deal. So we dare you, if you're a tier 2 brand coming up against a big brand that isn't prepared to provide a better deal, to tempt this consumer and come to us and work with us, because we want to bring over 60s a better deal. Ooh, keep going through. And they're interested in adopting some of today's changes into their lives. I think this is an opportunity for technology companies to speak to them about home tech, smart home, some of the things they can do to make their lives better. They're curious. 75% say they're curious about new products that suit their needs. And I think that's an opportunity that brands really could lean over into. 13% say they strongly agree, and 62% say they agree. So I'd like to see more technology talked about in this generation. And I have to say, look out to the financial services industry. We are waiting for a day when the big banks step up to speak to this consumer again. Whilst the race is on for the home loan, this consumer is largely ignored and waiting to be serviced. And if you look at the data here, 31% agree that they're prepared to switch financial services companies for a better rate or better product, and 15% strongly agree. We're starting to see some really innovative superannuation-based products come to market, and interesting annuity products, interesting products that will help the consumer earn a retirement income over a lifetime. And I think that's something that we can really help the consumer understand as an industry, things that are better for them. We dare you to be competitive for the baby boomer and innovate the products available to them. Online shopping. Well, if you'd asked me 5 years ago whether I thought this demographic was very interested, I'd have said no. But COVID changed all of that, perhaps even the year before COVID. 54% now say they really enjoy online shopping. And I mean really enjoy, like my kids say they really enjoy. 18% are on the fence and 17% do not enjoy it. Well, I think 54% is plenty to work with. Let's have a look at what they're buying. 57%, so nearly 58% say they're buying clothing and fashion. 52% are buying gifts for family and friends. 43% are buying books, movies, music and games online, and 35% are buying footwear. Footwear being one of the most challenging categories to sell online, but it comes ahead of health products. where 35% are buying them online. In entertainment, we've increasingly been locked out for the last year, but 35% say they bought it in the last year. Home decorating items, a category that's really emerging in online, 30%. Office supplies at 27%. And then we come down into travel, where we see 26% have booked a hotel online. Liquor, 26%. Beauty products, one of the interesting products that's been going viral on our website in the last week. And airline tickets at 25%. I could keep going, but I will keep moving because I'm conscious we have a time frame to work in today. How often do they drink? And I wanted to show you the full spectrum of this data. 15%, and as we know, that Nielsen data point that 50% of alcohol spend is undertaken by a 60 plus. Perhaps that's the magnitude of the spend and the quality is higher than younger generations. It's worth considering. But 15% say 15.7% say they drink every day. 26.5% say they drink a few times a week. 10% say they drink weekly. And the other end of the spectrum, we see 20% who say they drink a few times a year and 17% who say they don't drink. And in our experiences, we're seeing both ends of the spectrum exist in the purchasing cycle for brands that speak to this generation. We're seeing that 50% of that alcohol spend is over there in those high drinking categories, but we're seeing this growing non-alcoholic beverages category start to come through in our marketplace. And it's a really interesting category for this demographic as they look to their health and well-being. Travel. We all love to talk about travel and baby boomers. And I know I have a few travel industry out there. Thank you for coming along today. Travel dreams, and you didn't need me to tell you this, have turned domestic. And here in Travel at 60, if you're one of our beautiful partners that works with us, you'll know we've built an enormous pool of domestic holidays to serve this generation and maintained demand all the way through COVID, except for these horrible lockdown days. 57% say they will consider a domestic independent traveling holiday in the next 3 years. And 37% say they'll be off to stay with family when they can. 26% say they're interested in a domestic tour. And then you come into the international and cruise market, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about on next slides, because we did ask some very explicit questions that I'll talk you through the results of. The thing I hold close to my heart is that we've seen travel swing wildly up and down over the last year and a half as we've traversed COVID. We've had record days where cruise has gone wild, and we've had really quiet periods where confidence is low, and you can see it in the response to an email immediately in our business and know the way the consumer is feeling. And I'm sure a lot of you in the travel industry can feel the same way. Some sentiment to consider, because when you've got the media on the tailwind, we know this industry turns very, very fast. So across a couple of questions, here's some data that came through our survey. 41% said, I don't want to cruise again in the future. And yet back in March, we had our biggest ever cruise selling days. So it's interesting to anecdote that. 20% said, I'm likely to cruise Australia and surrounds in the 2 years post-COVID. And 39% said, I'm interested in cruising again, but not ready to decide when. And obviously we're sitting in no man's land on cruise until the government changes, it tells us what the rules are going to be. But 8.6% said they can't wait to cruise again. And 7.8% said they will cruise again within 1 year of reopening. So we know there's a really good batch of first adopters out there waiting to step back onto those beautiful ships when they've solved into the next stage. More travel insights that might help you understand this generation and why we love to bring them travel through Travel at 60. 75% do not have a travel agent they're loyal to. That's a really interesting insight after the last year. 33% consider themselves a solo traveler, and 76% have booked flights or hotels online, with 35% saying they've booked a cruise online in the last year before COVID. And that ends my little coverage of travel. It's a tough pocket to cover in a lockdown from here in Queensland, but I'm also hugely excited about the travel industry and what we can do in the recovery period. That is not that far away, guys. I mean, we are building product that is selling here into the domestic market every day. Our phones are ringing upstairs, even in a lockdown. And, you know, we're very carefully managing the need to serve this consumer through the uncertainty and the cancellation cycle so that we can be there with you, our operator partners, on the upswing. There's enormous pent-up demand for downsizing. We know the more that we get these lockdowns and opens up, that the property market has remained tight, and that the baby boomer has one of the sexiest houses for real estate agents to sell, because they're the bigger, more valuable houses that have been sitting in locked up supply for years. 11% of our community has been sitting on their house for a little while and is considering downsizing anytime now, right now. 36% have already downsized, and 52% are happy where they are and haven't downsized yet. So that's a big wave of downsizing ahead of them in our community that need to be spoken to about the journey. You've got to remember that when somebody downsizes, a couple of different transactions take place. They free up a whole lot of cash, and they need to understand how they'll turn that into a retirement income. So the opportunity for businesses is to help them plan and place that money through good retirement planning. The opportunity is that they need to buy another home. And often they've freed up that money for a series of adventures and exciting things like Bernard talked about. And I think that all of those opportunities, whether that be buying a caravan, having a big holiday once big holidays are a thing to do again, or renovating the next house, is even still on their bucket list if they've bought a smaller house. This generation owns valuable, mostly unmortgaged property. Less than 15% of the generation is actually carrying a mortgage, and 28% own a home worth more than $750,000, something I hear younger people lament as I walk around the industry. So this little snapshot will show you just how valuable their homes are. And when you free up $750,000 and you buy a retirement community for $440 or $480, that little pack of cash will generate you a retirement income if it's properly invested for a good few years to come, if you put it into the right product. Downsizing, as I said, frees up that cash for investments, and it also flows into retirement community demand. A couple of years ago, retirement communities were really on the nose. Back when we saw reviews into this industry and a lot of press coverage that was negative, I would never have even dreamed of this data coming through looking like this. But in April of this year, 27% of our community said they would consider retirement living as a downsizing destination. And I think 66% say they don't think it suits me. But for an industry that currently only has 5 to 6% take up, 6% of our community take up, this is a phenomenal wave of opportunity coming towards you that is really your opportunity to grab a hold of. The other side of this generation, and one that we haven't found all the right solutions for, is that this generation holds a lot of money in cash, and there's not a lot of solutions for them to put their cash in a good place to get a return at the moment. 43% say they have money put aside in cash for a holiday, not put away in their income generating assets, because you can't get a term deposit with a decent return on investment. 32% say they don't have expenditure saved, but 28% have thousands of dollars put away for emergency funds. 21% have money put aside for a car purchase right now. 19% have money for funeral costs, an opportunity for prepaid funeral bond type providers. 17% have money put aside to renovate their house. 7% have money put aside to pay off their debt. And 4.5% have money for a caravan put aside. 2.2% right now have the money aside to cover their entry into a retirement village. Really interesting insights to how this consumer plans to spend. And to finish off today, the data part of my presentation, I wanted to talk about how COVID made a difference in our surveying of this consumer. 65% delayed a large holiday that they had booked. So that's a pretty large amount of pent-up demand. 8.4% delayed their retirement. 22.5% contributed money to help their kids with expenses. 7.6% lost their job. 4.9% actually made a significant investment gain out of COVID. 6% had a child move home, and 13% delayed a child's wedding. All important factors in looking inside this generation. So now I'm going to move on, and I'll just stop and check for some questions if there's any in there for me before I move on. None opened, which is wonderful. And I will stop again to check a little further along our conversation. You may have seen the very witty Jean Kitson in our television ads recently on Channel 7, coining the phrase "1 million Aussie boomers ready to spend the kids' inheritance." I think we're very proud of what Jean is calling out, that 60-year-olds know how to use the internet, they know how to shop online, and it's time for us, the marketers in this generation, to bring them good deals, great products, and a good experience online so that they can enjoy the same benefits we all enjoy from our online platforms. Next slides. I promised in the event overview that I'd provide you a little overview of what Starts at 60 does and where we've gone in the last year with our move to be content to commerce. As you can see, our website has now been divided into 3 fundamental pillars: the news pillar, the travel pillar, and the shop pillar. And when we talk about those, I'll walk you through, we talk very much about how content plus commerce equals results. Our business is built around one audience and 3 big pillars: the Starts at 60 news and media business pillar, which has our daily news and media, which publishes our email newsletters, which have news in them. We also have our retirement guide, increasingly an educational guide area with a bottom of funnel that will be working in partnership with services brands to help consumers navigate retirement. That will be coming to life over the next couple of weeks. And we have another new section called the Lab, which is where our over 60s get involved and test products and experiences and provide consumers with real feedback, whether that be across fashion, beauty, retirement communities, and other things. And that's becoming a really nice peer-to-peer influencer platform. We work with brands in that part of the business as partnerships, advertising, content marketing, and campaigns. Pretty standard ways of working with agencies and clients, and work with some of Australia's largest brands. Travel at 60 is our travel operator and travel marketplace business. We have a full service call center that is serving our consumers 5 days a week. And we work with trade and operator partners in normal contracting arrangements direct with our team. We have our own product team in-house that curates for this generation and builds our own products. And we also sell the products of major operators all over Australia and throughout the world. And we work with a lot of tourism boards to communicate great ideas and great inspiration for this generation. And we have the Starts at 60 marketplace, which evolved over the last year. We work with vendor partners and we bring your feeds to life with our consumer in our marketplace. We bring our consumer both full price product and hot deals. And it is astounding to watch that consumer snap them up. This week, I think we've had deals on beauty, turmeric and vitamin products, all the way across to slippers and other gorgeous products that this consumer is just walking out the door, to the point where they're sold out as we finish a couple of days of sales. Our audience is now spanning right across the spectrum. We speak to them daily by email. We're on social. They're coming direct to our website now. We have advertising in the newspapers promoting our travel offerings. And you'll see us on television too now as well. Watch out during the Olympics. And thank you to Channel 7 for that. Our mission is simple and it's really, really clear 9 years into running Starts at 60. For consumers, it's to curate the needs and wants of the over 60s online and get our members a better deal wherever possible through the power of this online community that they have so much support for. And we work across 13 categories in that marketplace. Fashion, footwear, homewares, and health is how we summarize them. In travel, we work across cruises, tours, and package holidays. And in media, we work across news, views, and media. And we do have an insurance offering there. Starts at 60 is just for over 60s. And our role and our mission for brands is to connect your products and services with over 60s of Australia to drive awareness, interest, and demand using the power of content, commerce, travel, and community. So that takes you on the journey I was really hoping to take you on today. And that really covers the ground that many of you have come to cover. So I will now turn that off, and I can see one brief Q&A in there to see if we have answered everybody's questions today. The slides, so all of this data is available in our Boomer Guide. So this video will be available on YouTube at the end of the presentation as well. Thank you to Lara who has asked that. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Don't hesitate to email me at team@startsatsixty.com. Our team is always there, and we can put you in touch with the marketplace, the travel team. I can answer your questions. There we go. I've just been asked a couple of questions. There we go. They're coming in. How many people were surveyed? 1,800 people were surveyed for the Boomer Guide. This comes on top of a data capture that we've done over 4 years of about 28,000 over 60s. We have 1 million monthly active users here at Starts at 60, and about 220,000 active signed up members receiving our emailers, opening them, clicking through to deals and participating in activities that we run. So we're always very enthusiastic about the audience. They are all digitally savvy, and that is a part of how we built our community. Susan has just asked, do we find that users in news are also users in the marketplace? Very much so. Our community has come because they want a better deal. They want information, and that content to commerce journey for us is a way that we can serve that. So we start with content, we educate them on areas of their life where they have needs by using all this data and insight. And then we help find brands that can solve those problems. In some industries, we haven't been able to find brands that would serve them well at the travel agency level. So we've actually built the travel agency and focused on working with travel operators who had really good products. In retail, we found that a lot of the retailers didn't want to service this consumer in a dedicated manner. So we work with more generalist retailers to find and curate the products that really do serve the needs of this generation, many of whom are a larger size, many of whom have different footwear needs, many of whom have different lifestyle needs to younger generations and are looking for the way to be spoken to directly. So that wraps up. I could talk forever on this subject, and I welcome any of you to reach out to me on LinkedIn and anywhere else that you would like to have a chat. You'll find me on LinkedIn under Wilson Beck. Thank you for coming today, everyone.
They say boomers are too old to understand online shopping. Oh, no, I just bought a fortnight in Port Douglas. Oh, and an outfit to go with it. Silly me.
You must be at Starts at 60, Jean, the website for 1 million Aussie boomers to shop, travel, and find out what everyone's talking about. There's amazing deals on cruises, tours, package holidays, fashion, homewares, health, and more.
1 million Aussie boomers ready to spend the kids' inheritance.